All right, what if I told you that you could go from a brilliant app idea to a live product in minutes instead of months? No, seriously, that's the power of this thing called serverless architecture. Today, we're going to break down exactly what that means and, honestly, why it's such a massive deal for anyone building software. So let's just jump right into it. What if you could launch an app without ever touching a server? I mean, never having to provision one, configure it, or even think about it. Sounds kind of like magic, right? Well, that is the core promise of serverless, and that's exactly what we're digging into. Okay, so to really get why this is such a revolution, we kind of have to take a quick look back at the old way of doing things. I'm talking about the world of traditional server setups. And let's be real, it was a world full of complexity and, yeah, a ton of headaches. You know the drill, right? First, you actually had to order a physical server and wait for it to arrive. Then you'd install the OS, all the software you needed. Then you had to configure the entire network, get the security right, and only after all that, finally, you could deploy your code. And it never ended. You were constantly on the hook for monitoring, patching security holes, and God forbid you got a huge traffic spike, you had to scramble to scale everything. It was a full-time job in itself. So what's the bottom line here? It's that your team was spending a massive chunk of their time and energy just managing the infrastructure, the servers, the network, all that stuff, instead of focusing on the one thing that actually matters to your users, writing great code and building cool features. But what if you could just flip that whole model on its head? And that's exactly where the serverless idea comes in. And look, this isn't just some new tool. It's a totally different way of thinking, a whole new philosophy about who should be worrying about all that messy infrastructure. When you get right down to it, the definition is actually super simple. Serverless architecture is basically a deal you make with a cloud provider, like AWS, Google, or Azure. You tell them, hey, you guys handle all the server stuff, the provisioning, the scaling, everything. They take care of it all behind the scenes. Your only job? Just write and upload the code. That's it. And this is probably the best analogy I've ever heard for it. The old way? That's like owning and operating your own personal power plant. I mean, you're responsible for everything. Buying the fuel, doing all the maintenance, making sure you have enough capacity, even when you're not using it. But serverless, that's just like plugging into the electrical grid. You just flip a switch when you need power, and you only pay for exactly what you use. It's that simple. Okay, so this all sounds amazing, right? But how does it actually work? What's the magic behind the curtain? Let's peel back the layers and see what's really going on when your code needs to run. It's surprisingly clever. So, it all comes down to this idea of functions. Instead of one big monolithic application, you break your code down into these small, self-contained pieces. You upload these little functions to the cloud provider, and here's the key part, they just sit there, dormant, costing you absolutely nothing, zero. Then something happens. We call it an event. It could be anything. A user clicks a button, someone uploads a photo, whatever. That event instantly triggers the one specific function it needs. The cloud provider spins up a server just for that moment, runs your code, gets the job done, and then poof, it's gone. The whole thing vanishes. No idle servers, no wasted money. So when you work this way, you get some absolutely huge wins. And I mean, they directly fix all those headaches we talked about from the old model. We're talking about incredible speed, huge cost savings, and scaling that's, basically automatic. First up, speed. Just think back to that long, painful deployment process we talked about. With serverless, it's just gone. That whole complicated server setup phase wiped off the map. You literally just write your function and deploy it. That's it. What used to take days or even weeks now takes minutes. It's an absolute game changer for how fast a team can move. Okay, and then there's the cost, which is just, wow. This really gets to the core of it. You only pay for the compute time you actually use. I mean, they bill you down to the millisecond, but only when your code is running. So all that time your functions are just sitting there waiting for an event, you're paying nothing, not a single cent. And this chart just lays it out perfectly. Over here on the left, that's the old way, a big, fat, fixed cost every single month for your server, whether it's doing anything or just sitting there collecting dust. But look over on the right. That's serverless. The cost is completely variable, and it perfectly mirrors your actual usage. If you have an app with unpredictable traffic, quiet 1 minute, slammed the next, the savings can be absolutely massive. And what happens when you get successful? What if your app goes viral overnight? In the old world, that was both a dream and a nightmare. It meant a frantic, panic scramble to add more servers before the whole thing crashed and burned. But in the serverless world, you don't do anything. The cloud provider handles it all, automatically. It doesn't matter if one person hits your app or a million people hit it at the exact same time. The platform just scales to meet the demand. You can just sit back and watch it happen. All right, so this all sounds a little too good to be true, doesn't it? And like with any powerful technology, it's not a magic bullet that solves every single problem. It's really important to be realistic and understand the trade-offs before you jump in with both feet. So yeah, the pros are huge. Lower costs, faster deployment, automatic scaling, we've covered those. But there are some cons to think about. Vendor lock-in is a big one. It basically means it can be a real pain to move your app from, say, Amazon to Google. Then there's something called a cold start, which is just a tiny delay the very first time a function runs after being dormant for a while. And finally, finding a bug can be trickier. Instead of one big server log, you've got tons of little functions, so monitoring can get more complex. And that really brings us to the single most important thing to remember about all of this. The name serverless is honestly a little misleading. Because of course there are still servers. There are tons of them. The revolution isn't no servers. The revolution is no server management. It's about letting someone else worry about the hardware so that developers can get back to doing what they're actually great at, building amazing things. So I want to leave you with this one thought. When you free up all that time, all that money, and all that mental energy that used to be wasted on managing servers, what does that unlock? The question stops being how you're going to build your next big idea. The only question left is, what will you build next?